Coming from developer Lienzo, which is the Spanish word for canvas, and the development team responsible for Mulaka, which was released on Switch a few years ago, Aztech Forgotten Gods is a much more ambitious, open-world action-adventure title. As I saw through the open world, I'm reminded of Crackdown and Infamous, but it's all well and good having large spaces. Have you got enough to fill it with? Welcome back to SwitchUp, I'm Mark Walker, and thanks to Lienzo for the review copy. Is Aztech Forgotten Gods your next big adventure, or have they made one too many sacrifices? Well, let's find out. The story centers around Akti, whose mother is a researcher looking into ancient technologies from the past, and who, after discovering the Lightkeeper, has her research threatened with closure. Not willing to abandon her life's work, she, slightly irresponsibly, allows for her daughter to engage with the artifact, and they unleash all kinds of trouble upon their world. Set in a far future Mesoamerica, where technology has far outpaced the limits of power delivery, Akti attempts to wield the Lightseeker, and she discovers it's far more than initially meets the eye. Gameplay allows you to travel freely around the large city area. It's part action-adventure and part boss rush. You can control Akti with the left stick, and then using the trigger buttons, you can launch her up into the sky. Her arm can be directed to essentially steer you like a thruster. There are two different coloured currencies in the game. These can be found by defeating normal enemies, but you'll also find a number of hidden memory fragments dotted all over the city, and you can use them to either upgrade your character from an aesthetic perspective, changing hairstyle, clothes, with the ulterior currency being used to purchase permanent character upgrades. This could be the amount of HP you've got, the period of time with which you can boost through the air, and the more you unlock, the more skills you'll gain. Movement is one of Aztech's biggest strengths. Holding down the R bumper will build up a charge shot, and much like Superman, send you blasting off into the sky. There's a real freedom here, and also Lienzo have thought about forcing the player to calculate their next location, as you cannot rocket indefinitely. Cars that are hovering in the air can be jumped onto to rest, or you can run against walls, go through booster portals, and even, once unlocked, rebound jump back off the ground, sending you back with a new tank of gas, so to speak. The fist is also used for combat, and that's where the boss rush segment of the game comes in. Without giving away too much detail, the main character's actions have caused certain entities to enter this world, and you'll need to defeat those. From a design perspective, these boss fights are actually quite exhilarating. Unfortunately though, the camera isn't quite up to scratch when it comes to this kind of frenetic action. There's a lock-on mechanic, but it happens automatically. This can, in certain situations, whiplash the camera around, leaving it in solid objects, or completely hiding the player for a few moments. It can be really disorienting, and in a fast-paced action game like this, it's something that needs to be spot on. Now, the fights themselves with these bosses are quite well designed. Some of them will be multi-stage, requiring different tactics, such as dropping shields or using new abilities to defend and break their guard. And thanks to the Lightseeker glove, much of it will take place in the air. When it's all working well, it really is exciting, and certainly the boss fights are the best part of the game. Between combat, there are some smaller enemies, but there's a distinct lack of variety. The same could be said about the activities that are available to you within this city. There's some checkpoint races and the aforementioned memory seeking, but it's still a sparse sandbox. Between the boss encounters and the open world adventuring, you'll sometimes have some other tasks to perform, such as gathering up certain items. It's fine to have it in there, but the way you can be forced to slowly plod around, looking for flashing items on shelves, it doesn't exactly scream 2022 gaming. The same could be said for the mapping and navigation of the city. Although there's a map that you gain that's shown in the bottom corner, and the waypoint system is easy enough to follow, there's no way of enlarging that map to fill the screen. You can't plot waypoints or look at certain locations that you want to visit. What you need to remember, really, is that Lienzo are a smaller indie development team. 9 times out of 10, indies go for the safe option of 2D pixel art. This is because creating a fully 3D environment just isn't easy, and there's so much work that needs to go into every area to get it just right. There's certainly an enjoyable experience in here, but one which by modern standards comes across as lacking in certain areas, and with a few fundamentals that need ironing out, such as the camera controls. While I enjoy the story and it continues with Lienzo's drawing upon ancient cultures, the delivery could certainly be improved upon, as we'll go on to in the next section. For me, gameplay scores 14 out of 20, and the controls also score 14 out of 20. Visually, Aztech Forgotten Gods is not a very pretty game on the Nintendo Switch. It suffers from aliasing, jaggy edges on the outsides of objects, very low texture quality, and some performance hiccups. Generally, they've managed to get it running at 30 frames per second, but the resolution, draw distance, level of detail draw distance, and just about anything on a technical level suffers significantly on the Switch. This is also strange because there's obviously some headroom here. You can record videos in handheld mode. Just removing that and being able to up the resolution slightly might be a good choice. The world design itself suffers from these low textures, with geometry also being quite poor. The bosses look great, and there are some really nice designs here. Some of the multi-stage areas that you'll fight in, those large arenas, are really quite impressive. One standout would be the lava. The way it splashes over the ground is very cool. Now, thankfully, it does maintain 30 frames per second for most of your playtime, and in an action adventure, that's almost the bare minimum. But another area I'd look to see improvements in Lienzo's next release would be in some of the animations. I noticed a few glitches, the way your character shakes as they move through the air, and then looping animations during story segments sometimes just look wrong. I mean, what does she want? It's again not a reflection of the skill of this developer, because they're making good games. It's just the amount of small details that are required to fully flesh out an open world adventure. There are some lovely audio tracks in here. These, as with many of the other gameplay aspects, draw upon the cultural inspirations. Juxtaposed to this, though, is a lack of ambient sound. This future city should be awash with sounds, but ends up feeling muted, and it's a game that would have benefited greatly from having voice actors. Handheld mode is my preferred way to play. The lower resolution looks better, which has the knock-on effect of everything looking crisper. Text size is absolutely fine, and to Lienzo's credit, they've worked hard to bring a really nice implementation of HD rumble. It's very granular, with every step you take registering a slight motion. Visuals and performance score 12 out of 20. Audio scores 14 out of 20. Retailing at £24.99, that's what I'd call premium indie. As I said, there's fun to be had here. It does capture that freedom of movement that you found in some of those old superhero games I mentioned. It just never, as a whole package, felt quite as coherent as it could have done, and certainly not as polished. I give value 14 out of 20. Aztech Forgotten Gods is a fun but flawed action adventure that never really reaches its full potential. For me, it would be a fun sales pickup. It gets a SwitchUp score of 68%. Thanks to all of you that watch the channel. I hope this has been of some use to you. Let me know down in the comments if it's one that you've considered. Honestly, I think on a platform that could run this at native 60 frames per second, the whole experience would be way more enjoyable. Thanks to our patrons and to our new ones, your names will be just after this with some nice music. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!